All right, let's welcome in our next guest. How about this? Co-host of VSiN PrimeTime, host of the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast, Tim Murray. You can follow him on Twitter at @1TimMurray. Tim, going to talk to you. I was listening yesterday and today at the Big 12 preview you had up for the College Football Betting Podcast. I want to start with the topic that you opened up with on your podcast, Texas. We really doing this again, huh? We're really doing this again with Texas. So walk us through why is it different? Because, and I'm sorry, the name escapes me, but tell us your guest who you had on. You guys opened this up. You talked about it, and it was funny because I was listening to him rattle off like, "Hey man, you mentioned Phil Steele, all these positions, best position groups in the Big 12, all this stuff," and I'm like, "This all sounds familiar. We've all done this before."
It's so funny, JVT, because Parker Fleming's his name. It's Stats O War on Twitter. He's a really good college football analytically based handicapper, and he kind of breaks down games on a weekly basis when the season rolls around. But it's funny, and I'm glad you picked up on that because I've had some really well-known handicappers, right? Paul Stone, Brad Powers, to name a few, on the show, and we've all kind of settled back in on. I'll paraphrase what both Paul and Brad kind of said collectively, which was, this is Texas, the most disappointing team over the last 15 years. I think they've hit their win total like twice, JVT. And yet they all finished that sentence with, but this year's different. So, to your point, it does feel like we're doing it again. We're back to, hey, as I put on my tweet today, as Joe Tessitore so famously said, Texas is back, folks, when they beat a crappy Notre Dame team to open up the 2016 season. Yep. So, look, it feels like they've got the most talent. Actually, it doesn't feel like they do have the most talent. Can they all put it together? Week 2, they're going to be on the biggest stage, right? Prime time in Tuscaloosa. The discussion we'll have again, like we did last year, JVT. Hey, if Quinn Ewers doesn't get hurt, does Texas win that game? Yeah, they probably do. They needed some magic from Bryce Young. A couple calls went their way, but then they lost other games, So, look, Texas is the best team in this conference. They showed it, pummeling Oklahoma 49-0 in the Red River Shootout last year. Plus money to win the conference, and I thought Parker had an interesting look at it. He said he would rather go plus 120, which is available at DraftKings, for them to win the conference, JVT, as opposed to over 9.5, because let's be honest, Texas going over their win total has not been a profitable endeavor for a long, long time. And oh, by the way, if you're wondering at home, the last time Texas, one of the most biggest brands in all of college football, the last time they won the Big 12, 2009.
Yeah. It's been a long time. That was the year I graduated high school, so it's been a while. All right, Texas at the top. Let's zoom out real quick and look at the conference as a whole. Last year was a conference that I called it like scrunched together, right? There was just a bunch of teams that were on the same level with one another. Hell, even TCU getting by the skin of their teeth multiple times, quarterback injury, you know the story. Is it the same story this year? Is this conference just kind of crunched together? Because you look at some of the numbers, there's a line of demarcation between the top 3, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas State. Then you get to Texas Tech at 12-1 after Kansas State at plus 450. These odds are over at DraftKings. What are we looking at in the conference as a whole? Is it going to mirror what we saw last year in the Big 12, or is there separation at the top?
I think there's a little bit of separation at the top, JVT, because I truly, and you look at some of the win totals from, the so-called cellar dwellers, right? Kansas is no longer a cellar dweller. And we actually talked about Kansas. We can get to them momentarily, but, basically everybody is around 4.5 wins on the bottom, right? So nobody is expected to full on stink in this conference because Kansas has gotten a lot better, made a bowl game last year. But you look at TCU. I mean, what do we expect from TCU this year? They made the magical run to the championship game last year. They did lose the conference championship game to Kansas State, but it was a team that has, I think, 3 starters returning on the offensive side. They lose Quentin Johnston. They lose Max Duggan. They lose, their top 2 running backs. So TCU's kind of a big shrug of the shoulders, right? They went to the portal. They got a couple Alabama guys coming in. Chandler Morris won the job outright out of camp. So last year, that is. So, TCU, I think a drop off from them should be expected. I think we talked about this a little bit. A buy low candidate could be a team like Baylor. Baylor who has kind of had this roller coaster ride even since, Matt Rule took over that program, JVT, where it's great and then it drops and it's great and it drops. I'm a Dave Aranda believer, and, Baylor could be an interesting team. Then, bringing it back to the team who's got the second shortest odds, JVT, Oklahoma. Oklahoma was a bit of a disaster last year, right? They go 6-6 in the regular season, lose their bowl game. What do we expect from Brent Venable's squad in year number 2? Dylan Gabriel's coming back, solid quarterback play, so we know they've got that on their side. But this is a team that lost actually a handful of guys to the pros, and they're coming off a 6-6 season. So Oklahoma's win total sitting at 9.5. But why I'm not racing to play the under is actually their schedule is kind of favorable. They've got a light non-conference. Do they easily dispose of SMU? That could be kind of a telling early portion of the season. But yeah, I think, maybe outside of Texas, which once again, as we alluded to, is a risky thing to say, it does feel like this conference is going to be kind of all jumbled together. And then, we've got the new 4 teams, JVT. What do we do with Houston, BYU, Cincinnati, and UCF? As they make the pretty big leap from the American Athletic Conference to the Big 12.
Yeah, Houston and Cincinnati, they get 5 Big 12 home games each this first season. So what do you make of, I'll ask it this way, of the 4 newcomers, who do you think has the most success here this season?
I think it's UCF. I think they've got the most talent on their roster. And I think they're probably, with that being said, that's why they have the highest win total of all of these teams that are entering the conference. Cincinnati, I kind of think Cincinnati's headed in the wrong direction. I thought it was, I don't want to say telling, because I would leave Cincinnati to go to Wisconsin as Luke Fickell did. But Luke Fickell was pretty kind of steadfast for a while, JVT. I'm not leaving. I'm staying. This is my spot. I also think he knew he had a really good team for those couple of years and, would make that run to the college football playoff and they could kind of hold things down. I think Luke Fickell saw the writing on the wall. So I think this is a bit of a rebuild, uninspiring hire, in my opinion, as Scott Satterfield, who kind of felt like he was going to get fired at Louisville and then was like, I'm out. I'm going to Cincinnati. So I'm very interested to see Cincinnati. I think they could struggle a little bit down there. Houston's got an intriguing quarterback situation there. So, I'm fascinated by that. By the way, if you thought Keaton Slovis had exhausted his eligibility, right, you'd be wrong. He is the quarterback of BYU this year, ladies and gentlemen.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.